four winds and the wild ocean. This was the domain of Grace O'Malley, otherwise known as Granuaile. She was born in 1530 in County Mayo, and she was the leader of her clan. She faced a lot of adversity on her rise to power. She had to fight other rival clans and also struggled to maintain her own power in her own clan in a time in Ireland where English expansionism was turning the country into a hotbed of oppression and revolt. Today I'm lucky enough to have been invited to Howth Castle to speak to the historian and resident Daniel Eglinton Carey about Grace's visit here. Right, Daniel, thanks for inviting me here. And this is an amazing place. Could you tell me the story of Grace O'Malley and her visit here?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a loose story, I suppose, as most things are that far back. But it's said that she came to the castle. She'd been over to see Elizabeth I, so they say. On her way back from there, she stops in Howth, down in the harbour. She moors her ship there and supposedly walks herself and her crew. I mean, we're only, 10 minutes walk from the harbour, up here to the front of the house. And when she arrives at the front gates, she's refused entry into the house. I suppose she was looking for food and water, maybe supplies, whatever. Naturally comes here. When she arrives, the gates aren't open. She's not received into the house. She's obviously pretty upset about the whole thing. And when you're walking back from the house down towards the harbour, tucked in on the left of the avenue, there's a ruin of an old church, which would have been the St. Lawrence family church at that time. And it said that in the church there was one of the housemaids, one of the nursemaids in the house, with a pram with a small child. And Grace makes her way in, sort of roughs up the maid, I suppose, and discovers that the child is one of the St. Lawrences, and she takes him. How far she got, we don't know. Maybe down onto the boat or not. Maybe all the way back out to Clew Bay. But either way, Lord Howth is upset that, as it turns out to be Lord Howth's grandson, has been taken. When he goes to get her back, she offers to get the child back. She offers to return him on the condition that A, the gates to the castle would never be shut to any visitors again, and B, that an extra space would always be let at the table. So if an unexpected visitor arrived at the house, they'd be welcome in to sit down and eat, as she hadn't been. And that's a tradition that's upheld in this room, in the house, every single day since then. And people often think when you come to the castle, you enter the estate through these wonderful big Gothic limestone gates just at the bottom of the hill. It's not those gates that she was refused at. It's the gates that actually, just out this window here, there's a 15th century gate tower with a big archway in it. And when you look in it, you'll see two wooden gates propped against the inside. It's those gates, because at that time the house was surrounded by a wall, and going through the archway in that tower was the only way in. So it was those gates that she was refused at, not the ones down here.
In your opinion, how much of the story is legend and how much is historical recorded fact, really?
Well, I always say that there was a wonderful wood carving here in the house up until only the last couple of years, which I believe the OPW now have it somewhere. So this is that wood carving. It actually looks quite small here, but it has the St. Lawrence coat of arms engraved into the top of it, and some of the mermaid, and a wyvern, which is always associated with the St. Lawrence family. It also has the St. Lawrence family motto down at the bottom here, but then the actual depiction, you can see, so there, that's supposed to be Grace O'Malley there with a little child in the rowing boat. So they've already made their way away from the castle. You can see the Hill of Howth there in the background. So that would say that the story was she actually did get him as far as the boat. Now, whether they got any further from there or not, I don't know. This is it's said to be an 18th century piece. I think it could be a little bit earlier. But there she is in a little rowing boat. There's the young child there wrapped in a blanket. You can see well, you can't really see it in the image, but the castle and the island are just in the distance there, Ireland's Eye. The St. Lawrence coat of arms up on the top. The family motto then is underneath it, down on the bottom. And there's, off on the right-hand side in particular, there's a mermaid engraved on the side here, which is a sort of another mythical story, a mythical creature that's always been associated with the St. Lawrence family. And you'll find that engraved on many of the family crests. It's quite a nice thing. As I say, the OPW, I think the OPW have it now. I'm not 100% certain, but it would be nice to have it brought back to the house, at some point in the near future. So that was carved some point in the 17th century, we think, which would have been not too long after the story was supposed to have taken place. I mean, was the story 1576? Was it 1592 or 3? I mean, there's always more so conflict as to when she is supposed to have gone over to London to see Elizabeth I, and supposedly she stops here on the way back. And there are always arguments about exactly what date that was. But I always say, because that wood carving exists from sort of 17s, would have been 16 odd that it was carved, there must be some truth to it to be carved at that particular time. And it's not something that's really been lost over a longer period.
How do you think this story exemplifies the clash and traditions of basic Gaelic Ireland and Anglo-Norman Ireland?
Yeah, well, I suppose there can often be a disconnect when looking in history between the families that were living in houses like this and controlling estates, and so the more traditional folklore and stories of the Gaelic people, or sort of the more native, what would be considered the more native people to the country. But I think that this story is a great cross between those two communities, and often there wouldn't be crossing stories between both sides in the history of the country. But I think the fact that the place was always set and still is always set was a good testament to, I suppose, not only the fact that the story may have had some serious truth to it, but the fact that the family here have always identified as an Irish family, but may not be seen as having a traditional Irish background. Very respectful of traditions and of folklore that is associated with more of the older Irish stories. I think it's a good connection between both.
Finally, Daniel, what do you think this story tells us about Grace O'Malley herself as a leader, a negotiator, and a woman in a man's world?
Yeah, well, I suppose she's always known as being a bit of a rogue, I suppose. But she was certainly at the top of her game, whatever game it was, and that would not have been traditionally expected of a woman at that time. She was the pirate queen, but still to hold that influence and power of negotiation over Lord Howth, who was a major political figure, not only locally here, but in a much more national sense at that time. And so to hold that influence over him, and for that story to prevail for so long. And if you talk to anyone locally, I mean, I suppose one of her main legacies now in Howth is that there's a housing estate named after her. Maybe not what she would have wanted, but to have that, longevity of that story lasting in, it shows that she was an important woman, not just now, but always, from the very beginning.
I find it crazy that there was almost an immediate effort to wipe her out of Irish history after she died, really, wasn't it? She's not even mentioned much in the annals of Ireland, except for as the wife of a guy called Richard and Iron. But that basically all the male chieftains at the time probably didn't want women to have an icon like Grace that broke all the molds of society.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting, particularly her connection to who would be considered the Anglo-Irish. And you often hear stories. I mean, if you go to Rockfleet and places like that, of course, you hear all about her. In Westport House, I don't know if they talk much about her out there, but there was a family connection between the O'Malleys, between herself and the Brown family of Westport. And I don't know whether she's spoken about too much there, but if you ask someone to tell you anything about Howth Castle, that is the one story that people will tell you. That is almost the main legacy of this house currently, is the fact that she was here. Mm-hmm.
No, she defined feminism before the word even existed.
I'm
really.
Sure she did.
yeah.
I'm sure she did, absolutely.
Well, anyway, Daniel, thank you very much.
Not at all.
I much appreciated that.
My pleasure. Well, thanks for coming.
All right.